past and present institutions/organizations, and those directly under influence of the Committee of 300 Academy for Contemporary Problems, Africa Fund, Agency of International Development, Albert Previn Foundation, Alliance Israelite Universale, American Civil Liberties Union, American Council of Race Relations, American Defense Society, American Press Institute, American Protective League, Anti-Defamation League, Arab Bureau, Arab Higher Committee, RCA Foundation, Armor Research Foundation, Arms Control and Foreign Policy Caucus, Arthur D. Little Inc. Asian Research Institute, Aspen Institute, Association for Humanistic Psychology, Augmentation Research Center, Baron de Hirsch Fund, Battelle Memorial Institute, Berger National Foundation, Berlin Center for Future Research, Bilderbergers, Black Order, Boycott Japanese Goods Conference, British Newfoundland Corporation, British Royal Society, Brotherhood of Cooperative Commonwealth, Bureau of International Revolutionary Propaganda, Canadian Jewish Congress, Cathedral of St. John the Divine, New York, Center for Advanced Studies in the Behavioral Sciences, Center for Constitutional Rights, Center for Cuban Studies, Center for Democratic Institutions, Center for International Policy, Center for the Study of Responsive Law, Christian Socialist League, Cine Foundation, Club of Rome, Cominform, Committee for the Next 30 Years, Committee of 14, Committee on National Morale, Committee to Frame a World Constitution, Communist League, Congress of Industrial Organizations, Council on Foreign Relations, David Sassoon Company, De Beers Consolidated Mines, Democratic League of Brussels, East India Committee of 300, Economic and Social Control, ECOSOC, Environmental Fund, Environmetrics Inc., Esalen Institute, Fabian Society, Federation of American Zionists, Fellowship for a Christian Social Order, Fellowship of Reconciliation, Ford Foundation, Fordham University Institution Educational Research, Foundation for National Progress, Garland Fund, German Marshall Fund, Governing Body of the Israelite Religious Community, Gulf South Research Institute, Haganah, Harvard University, Hell's Fire Club, Horace Mann League, Hudson Guild, Hudson Institute, Hudson Bay Company, Imperial College University of London, Industrial Christian Fellowship, Institute for Brain Research, Institute for Pacific Relations, Institute for Policy Studies, Institute for Social Research, Institute for the Future, Institute for World Order, Institute on Drugs, Crime and Justice, Inter-Alpha, Inter-American Social Development Institute, International Institute for Strategic Studies, Inter-Religious Peace Colloquium, Irgun, Knights of Malta, League of Nations, Logistics Management Institute, London Board of Deputies of British Jews, London School of Economics, Mary Carter Paint Company, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Mellon Institute, Metaphysical Society, Milner Group, Mikado Metals, Mont Pelerin Society, NAACP, National Action Research on Military-Industrial Complex, National Center for Productivity Institute, National Council of Churches, National Opinion Research Center, National Training Laboratories, New Democratic Coalition, New World Foundation, New York Rand Institute, NORMEL, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, Oddfellows, Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Order of the Golden Dawn, Oxfam, Oxford Univac, Pacific Studies Center, Palisades Foundation, Peninsula and Orient Navigation Company, Permindex, Princeton University, Rand Corporation, Rand School of Social Sciences, Research Triangle Institution, Rhodes Scholarship Committee, Rio Tinto Zinc Company, Riverside Church Disarmament Program, Roundtable, Royal Institute for International Affairs, Russell Sage Foundation, San Francisco Foundation, Sharps Pixley Ward, Social Science Research Council, Socialist International, Socialist Party of the United States, Society for Promotion of Study of Religions, Society of Heaven, Triads, Soviet State Committee for Science and Technology, Stanford Research Institute, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Sun Yat-sen Society, Systems Development Corporation, Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, Tempo Corporation, the High 12 International, the Public Agenda Foundation, the Quality of Life Institute, Theosophist Society, Thule Society, Transatlantic Council, Trilateral Commission, U.S. Association of the Club of Rome, U.S. Institute for Peace, Union of Concerned Scientists, UNITAR, University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, Warburg, James P. and Family, Western Training Laboratories, Wilton Park, Women's Christian Temperance Union, Wong Hong Han Company, Work in America Institute, World Council of Churches. Special Foundations and Interest Groups, Arab Bureau, Aristotelian Society, Asian Research Institute, Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation, British American Canadian Corporation, Brotherhood of Eternal Love, Cambridge Apostles, Canadian Histadrut Campaign, Canadian Pacific Limited Caribbean Central American Action Group, China Everbright Holdings Limited Chinese People's Institute of Foreign Affairs, Council of South America, Endangered Peoples Society, English Property Corporation Limited Hospice Inc., International Brotherhood of Teamsters, International Red Cross, Jerusalem Foundation Canada, Kissinger Associates, Kowloon Chamber of Commerce, Organization of American States, Overseas Chinese Affairs Committee, Radio Corporation of America, RCA, Royal Police of Hong Kong, YMCA, Banks American Express, Banca della Svizzera d'Italia, Banca Andioino, Banca d'America d'Italia, Banca Nazionale del Lavoro, Banca Privata, Banco Ambrosiano, Banco Caribe, Banco Comercial Mexicana, Banco Consolidato, Banco de España, Banco de Colombia, Banco de Comercio, Banco de Iberio America, Banco de la Nación, Banco del Estado, Banco Internacional, Banco Latino, Banco Mercantil de Mexico, Banco Nacional de Cuba, Banco Nacional de Panama, and 54 smaller Panamanian banks. Bangkok Commercial d'Italian, Bangkok Metropolitan Bank, Bank Al-Mashreq, Bank America, Bank for International Settlements, Bank Hapoalim, Bank Loy, Bank Leumi, Bank of Bangkok, Bank of Boston, Bank of Canada, Bank of Credit and Commerce International, Bank of East Asia, Bank of England, Bank of Escambia, Bank of Geneva, Bank of Ireland, Bank of London and Mexico, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Norfolk, Bank of Nova Scotia, Bank Ohio, Bank Bruxelles Lambert, Banque Commerciale Arabaise, Banque du Crédit International, Banque Paris et Pays-Bas, Banque Française et Italienne pour l'Amérique du Sud, Banque Louis Dreyfus et Paris, Banque Privée, Banque Sud-Ameris, Barclays Bank, Baring Brothers Bank, Barnett Banks, Basler Handelsbank, Basel Committee on Bank Supervision, BCI, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, Centrust Bank, Chartered Bank, Charterhouse Jafet Bank, Chase Manhattan Bank, Chemical Bank, Citibank, Citizens and Southern Bank of Atlanta, City National Bank of Miami, Clarendon Bank, Cleveland National City Bank, Corporate Bank and Trust Company, Credit and Commerce American Holdings, Credit and Commerce Holdings, Netherlands Antilles, Credit Suisse, Crocker National Bank, De Neeflies, Schlumberger, Mallet Bank, Dresdener Bank, Dusseldorf Global Bank, First American Bank of Georgia, First American Bank of New York, First American Bank of Pensacola, First American Bank of Virginia, First American Banking Corp., First Empire Bank, First Fidelity Bank, First National Bank of Boston, First National City Bank, Florida National Bank, Foreign Trade Bank, Franklin National Bank, Hambros Bank, Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, Independence Bank of Encino, Israeli Discount Bank, Litex Bank, Ljubljanska Bank, Lloyds Bank, Marine Midland Bank, Midland Bank, Morgan at Sea, Morgan Grenfell Bank, Narodny Bank, National Bank of Cleveland, National Bank of Florida, National Westminster Bank, Orion Bank, Paravicini Bank Limited Republic National Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Schroeder Bank, Seligman Bank, Shanghai Commercial Bank, Soong Bank, Standard and Chartered Bank, Standard Bank, Swiss Bank Corporation, Swiss Israel Trade Bank, Trade Development Bank, Unibank, Union Bank of Israel, Union Bank of Switzerland, Vanying Bank, White Weld Bank, World Commerce Bank of Nassau, World Trade Bank, Rothschild Handelsbank. Note, with the exception of the Basel Committee on Banking, each of the above-mentioned banks have been and may still be involved in the drug, diamond, gold, and weapons trade. BCCI. This bank has been indicted on several charges of being heavily involved in drug money laundering throughout the world. Its structure girds every operation of the Committee of 300. Of interest is its corporate structure. BCCI Middle East interests, 35% of stock held by ruling families of Bahrain, Sharjah, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and a group of Middle East businessmen. BCCI Cayman Islands 41%, Bank of America 24%. BCCI Cayman Islands and BCCI Luxembourg established agency offices in Miami, Boca Raton, Tampa, New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Legal associations and lawyers: American Bar Association, Clifford and Warnke, Coudert Brothers, Cravath, Swain and Moore, Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher, accountants, auditors, Price, Waterhouse. Tavistock institutions in the United States, Flow Laboratories gets contracts from the National Institute of Health. Merle Thomas Corporation gets contracts from the U.S. Navy, analyzes data from satellites. Walden Research does work in the field of pollution control. Planning Research Corporation, Arthur D. Little, GE Tempo, Operations Research, Inc. Part of approximately 350 firms who conduct research and conduct surveys, make recommendations to government. They are part of what President Eisenhower called a possible danger to public policy that could itself become captive of a scientific technological elite. Brookings Institution dedicates its work to what it calls a national agenda. Wrote President Hoover's program, President Roosevelt's New Deal, the Kennedy administration's New Frontiers program, deviation from it cost John F. Kennedy his life, and President Johnson's Great Society. Brookings has been telling the United States government how to conduct its affairs for the past 70 years, and is still doing so on behalf of the Committee of 300. Hudson Institute. Under the direction of Herman Kahn, this institution has done more to shape the way Americans react to political and social events, think, vote, and generally conduct themselves than perhaps any, except the Big Five. Hudson specializes in defense policy research and relations with the USSR. Most of its military work is classified as secret. One idea during the Vietnam War was to build a moat around Saigon. Some of its earlier papers were entitled Stability and Tranquility Among Older Nations and Analytical Summary of U.S. National Security Policy Issues. Hudson prides itself on its diversity. It helped NASA with its space programs and helped to promote new youth fashions and ideas, youth rebellion and alienation for the Committee of 300, ostensibly funded by Coca-Cola. Hudson may be quite properly classified as one of the Committee of 300's brainwashing establishments. Some of its nuclear war scenarios make for very interesting reading, and, if they can be obtained, I would recommend The 6 Basic Thermonuclear Threats and Possible Outcomes of Thermonuclear War, and one of its more frightening papers entitled Israeli-Arab Nuclear War. Hudson also does corporate advising for Committee of 300 companies, Rank, Xerox, General Electric, IBM, and General Motors, to name but a few of them, but its really big client remains the U.S. Department of Defense, which includes matters of civil defense, national security, military policy, and arms control. To date, it has not got into wet NASA, that is to say, the National Oceanographic Agency. National Training Laboratories, NTL, is also known as the International Institute for Applied Behavioral Sciences. This institute is definitely a brainwashing center based on Kurt Lewin principles, which include so-called T-groups, training groups, artificial stress training whereby participants suddenly find themselves immersed in defending themselves against vicious accusations. NTL takes in the National Education Association, the largest teacher group in the United States. While officially decrying racism, it is interesting to note that NTL, working with NEA, produced a paper proposing education vouchers which would separate the hard-to-teach children from the brighter ones, and funding would be allocated according to the number of difficult children who would be separated from those who progressed at a normal rate. The proposal was not taken up. University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Finance and Commerce, founded by Eric Trist, one of the brain trusts of Tavistock, Wharton has become one of the more important Tavistock institutions in the U.S. insofar as behavioral research is concerned. Wharton attracts clients such as the U.S. Department of Labor, which it teaches how to produce cooked statistics at the Wharton Econometric Forecasting Associates Incorporated. This method is very much in demand as we come to the close of 1991, with millions more out of work than is reflected in USDL statistics. Wharton's econometric modeling is used by every major Committee of 300 company in the United States, Western Europe, and by the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and the World Bank. Wharton has produced such noteworthy persons as George Shultz and Alan Greenspan. Institute for Social Research. This is the institute set up by brain trusters from Tavistock Rensis Likert, Dorwin Cartwright, and Ronald Lippert. Among its studies are the human meaning of social change, youth in transition, and how Americans view their mental health. Among the Institute's clients are the Ford Foundation, U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Postal Service, and the U.S. Department of Justice. Institute for the Future. This is not a typical Tavistock institution in that it is funded by the Ford Foundation, yet it draws its long-range forecasting methodology from the mother of all think tanks. Institute for the Future projects what it believes to be changes that will be taking place in timeframes of 50 years. The Institute is supposed to be able to forecast socioeconomic trends and to blow the whistle on any departures from what it has laid down as normal. Institute for the Future believes it is possible and normal to intervene now and give decisions for the future. So-called Delphi panels decide what is normal and what is not, and prepare position papers to steer government in the right direction to head off such groups as people creating civil disorder. This could be patriotic groups demanding abolition of graduated taxes or demanding that their right to bear arms is not infringed. The Institute recommends actions such as liberalizing abortion laws, drug usage, and that cars entering an urban area pay tolls, teaching birth control in public schools, requiring registration of firearms, making the use of drugs a non-criminal offense, legalizing homosexuality, paying students for scholastic achievements, making zoning controls a preserve of the state, offering bonuses for family planning, and last, but by no means least, a Pol Pot Cambodia-style proposal that new communities be established in rural areas. As will be observed, many of the Institute for the Future's goals have already been more than fully realized. Institute for Policy Studies, IPS. One of the big three, IPS has shaped and reshaped United States policies, foreign and domestic, since it was founded by James P. Warburg and the Rothschild entities in the United States, bolstered by Bertrand Russell and the British Socialists through its networks in America, which include the League for Industrial Democracy, in which Leonard Woodcock played a leading, if behind-the-scenes role. Local lead players in the League for Industrial Democracy included conservative Jean Kirkpatrick, Irwin Sewall of the ADL, Eugene Rostow, arms control negotiator, Lane Kirkland, labor leader, and Albert Shanker. For record purposes only, IPS was incorporated in 1963 by Marcus Raskin and Richard Barnett, both highly trained Tavistock Institute graduates. Most of the funding came from Rothschild associates in America like the James Warburg family, the Stern Family Foundation, and the Samuel Rubin Foundation. Samuel Rubin was a registered member of the Communist Party who stole the Fabergé name. Fabergé was jeweler of the Imperial Russian court and made a fortune out of the Fabergé name. The objectives of IPS came from an agenda laid down for it by the British Round Table, which agenda in turn came from Tavistock Institute, one of the most notable being to create the New Left, as a grassroots movement in the U.S. IPS was to engender strife and unrest and spread chaos like a wildfire out of control, proliferate the ideals of left-wing nihilistic socialism, support unrestricted use of drugs of all types, and be the big stick with which to beat the United States political establishment. Barnett and Raskin controlled such diverse elements as the Black Panthers, Daniel Ellsberg, National Security Council staff member Halperin, the Weathermen Underground, the Venceramos, and the campaign staff of candidate George McGovern. No scheme was too big for IPS and its controllers to take on and manage. Take the plot to kidnap Kissinger, which was in the hands of Iqbal Ahmed, a British M16 intelligence agent of Pakistani origin, laundered through Trotskyite terrorists based in London. The plot was discovered by the FBI so that it could not go too far. Ahmed went on to become the director of one of IPS's most influential agencies, the Transnational Institute, which, chameleon-like, changed from its former name, Institute of Race Relations, when intelligence agents of BOSS, Bureau of State Security in South Africa, unmasked the fact that it was tied directly to Rhodes Scholarship, Harry Oppenheimer, and Anglo-American British mining interests in South Africa. BOSS also discredited the South Africa Foundation at the same time. Through its many powerful lobbying groups on Capitol Hill, IPS relentlessly used its big stick to beat Congress. IPS has a network of lobbyists, all supposedly operating independently, but in actual fact acting cohesively, so that congressmen are pummeled from all sides by seemingly different and varied lobbyists. In this way, IPS was and is still able to successfully sway individual representatives and senators to vote for the trend, the way things are going. By using key point men on Capitol Hill, IPS was able to break into the very infrastructure of our legislative system and the way it works. To give only a single concrete example of what I am talking about, in 1975, an IPS point man persuaded Representative John Conyers, D. Michigan, and 47 members of the House to request IPS to prepare a budget study that would oppose the budget being prepared by President Gerald Ford. Although not adopted, the request was reinstated in 1976, 1977, and 1978, gathering sponsors as it went. Then, in 1978, 56 congressmen signed their names to sponsor an IPS budget study. This was prepared by Marcus Raskin. Raskin's budget called for a 50% cut in the defense budget, a socialist housing program that would compete with and steadily replace private housing and mortgage markets, a national health service, radical changes in the educational system that would disrupt capitalist control over the distribution of knowledge, and several other very radical socialist ideas. The influence of IPS on arms control negotiations was a major factor in getting Nixon to sign the treasonous ABM Treaty in 1972, which left the United States virtually defenseless against ICBM attack for almost 10 years. IPS became and remains to this day one of the most prestigious think tanks controlling foreign policy decisions, which we, the people, foolishly believe are those of our lawmakers. By sponsoring militant activism at home and with links to revolutionaries abroad, by engineering such victories as the Pentagon Papers, besieging the corporate structure, bridging the credibility gap between underground movements and acceptable political activism, by penetrating religious organizations and using them to sow discord in America, such as radical racial politics under the guise of religion, using the establishment media to spread IPS ideas, and then supporting them, IPS has lived up to the role which it was founded to play. Stanford Research Institute Jesse Hobson, the first president of Stanford Research Institute, in a 1952 speech made it clear what lines the institute was to follow. Stanford can be described as one of the jewels in Tavistock's crown in its rule over the United States. Founded in 1946, immediately after the close of WW2, it was presided over by Charles A. Anderson, with emphasis on mind control research and future sciences. Included under the Stanford umbrella was Charles F. Kettering Foundation, which developed the changing images of man, upon which the Aquarian conspiracy rests. Some of Stanford's major clients and contracts were at first centered around the defense establishment, but as Stanford grew, so did the diversity of its services. Applications of behavioral sciences to research management, Office of Science and Technology, SRI Business Intelligence Program, U.S. Department of Defense Directorate of Defense Research and Engineering, U.S. Department of Defense Office of Aerospace Research. Among corporations seeking Stanford services were Wells Fargo Bank, Bechtel Corporation, Hewlett-Packard, Bank of America, McDonnell Douglas Corporation, Blythe, Eastman Dillon, and TRW Company. One of Stanford's more secret projects was extensive work on chemical and bacteriological warfare, CAB, weapons. Stanford research is plugged into at least 200 smaller think tanks doing research into every facet of life in America. This is known as ARPA networking and represents the emergence of probably the most far-reaching effort to control the environment of every individual in the country. At present, Stanford's computers are linked with 2,500 sister research consoles, which include the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, Bell Telephone Laboratories, U.S. Army Intelligence, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, RANI, MIT, Harvard, and UCLA. Stanford plays a key role in that it is the library, cataloging all ARPA documentation. Other agencies, and one can use one's imagination here, are allowed to search through SRI's library for keywords, phrases, look through sources, and update their own master files with those of Stanford Research Center. The Pentagon, for instance, uses SRI's master files extensively, and there is little doubt that other U.S. government agencies do the same. Pentagon command and control problems are worked out by Stanford. While ostensibly these apply only to weapons and soldiers, there is absolutely no guarantee that the same research could not and will not be turned to civilian applications. Stanford is known to be willing to do anything for anyone, and it is my belief that if ever SRI were to be fully exposed, the hostility which would arise from revelations as to what it actually does would most probably force SRI to close. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Alfred P. Sloan, School of Management. This major institute is not generally recognized as being a part of Tavistock, USA. Most people look upon it as a purely American institution, but that is far from being the case. MIT Alfred Sloan can be roughly divided into the following groups: Contemporary Technology, Industrial Relations, Lewin Group Psychology, NASA RC Computer Research Laboratories, Office of Naval Research Group, Psychology, Systems Dynamics. Forrester and Meadows wrote the Club of Rome's Limits of Growth Zero Growth Study. Some of MIT's clients include the following: American Management Association, American Red Cross, Committee for Economic Development, GTE, Institute for Defense Analysis, IDA, NASA, National Academy of Sciences, National Council of Churches, Sylvania, TRW, U.S. Army, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Navy, U.S. Treasury, Volkswagen Company. So vast is the reach of IDA that it would take hundreds of pages to describe the activities in which it is engaged, and IDA is fully described in my book on the role played by institutions and foundations in committing treason against the United States of America, which will be published early in 1992. RAND Research and Development Corporation. Without a doubt, RAND is the think tank most beholden to Tavistock Institute and certainly the RIIA's most prestigious vehicle for control of United States policies at every level. Specific RAND policies that became operative include our ICBM program, prime analyses for U.S. foreign policy making, instigator of space programs, U.S. nuclear policies, corporate analyses, hundreds of projects for the military, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, in relation to the use of mind-altering drugs like peyote, LSD, the covert MK-Ultra operation which lasted for 20 years. Some of RAND's clients include the following: American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T, Chase Manhattan Bank, International Business Machines, IBM, National Science Foundation, Republican Party, TRW, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Health. There are literally thousands of highly important companies, government institutions, and organizations that make use of RAND's services, and to list them all would be an impossible task. Among RAND's specialities is a study group that predicts the timing and the direction of a thermonuclear war, plus working out the many scenarios based upon its findings. RAND was once accused of being commissioned by the USSR to work out terms of surrender of the United States government, an accusation that went all the way to the United States Senate, where it was taken up by Senator Symington and subsequently fell victim to articles of scorn poured out by the establishment press. Brainwashing remains the primary function of RAND. To summarize, the major Tavistock institutions in the United States engaged in brainwashing at all levels, including government, the military, business, religious organizations, and education, are the following: Brookings Institution, Hudson Institute, Institute for Policy Studies, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, National Training Laboratories, RAND Research and Development Corporation, Stanford Research Institute, Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. It is estimated by sources of mine that the total number of people employed by these institutions is in the region of 50,000, with funding close to $LO billion. Some major worldwide committee of 300 institutions and organizations are as follows: Americans for a Safe Israel, Biblical Archaeology Review, Bilderbergers, British Petroleum, Canadian Institute of Foreign Relations, Christian Fundamentalism, Council on Foreign Relations, New York, Egyptian Exploration Society, Imperial Chemical Industries, International Institute for Strategic Studies, Order of Skull and Bones, Palestine Exploration Fund, Poor Knights of the Templars Royal Dutch Shell Company, Socialist International, South Africa Foundation, Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, Temple Mount Foundation, the Atheist Club, the Fourth State of Consciousness Club, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Milner Group, the Nazi Princes, the Order of Magna Mater, the Order of the Divine Disorder, the RIA, the Round Table, Trilateral Commission, Universal Freemasonry, Universal Zionism, Vickers Armament Company, Warren Commission, Watergate Committee, Wilton Park, World Council of Churches. Past and present members of the Committee of 300 Abergavenny, Marquis of Atchison, Dean, Dean, Lord Michael, Agnelli, Giovanni, Alba, Duke of Aldington, Lord, Alaman, Miguel, Alihoni, Professor T.E. Alsop, Family Designate, Amory, Houghton, Anderson, Charles A. Anderson, Robert Zero, Andreas, Dwayne, Asquith, Lord, Astor, John Jacob and successor Waldorf, Aurangzeb, descendants of, Austin, Paul, Baco, Sir Ranulph Balfour, Arthur, Baylog, Lord, Bancroft, Baron Stormont, Baring, Barnato, B. Baron, Sir John, Baxendale, Sir Peter, Beatrice of Savoy, Princess, Beaverbrook, Lord, Beck, Robert, Beely, Sir Harold, Bate, Alfred, Ben, Anthony Wedgwood, Bennett, John W. Benetton, Gilberto or alternate Carlo, Bertie, Andrew, Besant, Sir Walter, Bethel, Lord Nicholas, Bialkin, David, Biao, Kang, Bingham, William, Binney, J.F. Blunt, Wilfred, Bonacassi, Franco Orsini, Botcher, Fritz, Bradshaw, Thornton, Brandt, Willie, Brewster, Kingman, Buchan, Allister, Buffett, Warren, Bullitt, William C. Bulwer Lytton, Edward, Bundy, McGeorge, Bundy, William, Bush, George, Cabot, John, Family Designate, Keisha, Baron Harold Anthony, Cadman, Sir John, Califano, Joseph, Carrington, Lord, Carter, Edward, Catlin, Donat, Caddo, Lord, Cavendish, Victor C.W., Duke of Devonshire, Chamberlain, Houston, Stewart, Chang, V.F. Checharine, Georgie or Family Designate, Churchill, Winston, Cicerini, V. or Family Designate, Cinny, Count Vittorio, Clark, Howard, Cleveland, Amory, Cleveland, Harland, Clifford, Clark, Cobold, Lord, Coffin, the Rev. William Sloane, Constanti, House of Orange, Cooper, John, Family Designate, Coudenhove Kalergi, Count Cowdray, Lord, Cox, Sir Percy, Cromer, Lord Evelyn Baring, Crowther, Sir Eric, Cumming, Sir Mansfield, Curtis, Lionel, Darcy, William K. Davignon, Count Etienne, Danner, Jean de Rock, Davis, John W. de Benedetti, Carlo, de Bruin, Dirk, de Gunsberg, Baron Alain, de Lamaterre, Major General Walter, de Menil, Jean de Vries, Rimmer, de Zulueta, Sir Philip, de Ehrenberg, Marquis Charles Louis, Delano, Family Designate, Dent R. de Turding, Sir Henry, de Spataforas, Count Gutierrez, House Douglas Home, Sir Alec, Drake, Sir Eric Duchesne, Francois Dupont, Edward, Duke of Kent, Eisenberg, Shaw, Elliot, Nicholas, Elliot, William Yundell, Ellsworthy, Lord, Farmer, Victor, Forbes, John M. Foscaro, Pierre, France, Sir Arnold, Fraser, Sir Hugh, Frederick IX, King of Denmark, Family Designate, Freres, Lazard, Frescobaldi, Lamberto, Fribourg, Michael, Gabor, Dennis, Gallatin, Albert, Family Designate, Gardner, Richard, Geddes, Sir Auckland, Geddes, Sir Ray, George Lloyd, Giffen, James, Gilmer, John D. Giustiniani, Justin, Gladstone, Lord Gloucester, the Duke of Gordon, Walter Lockhart, Grace, Peter J. Greenhill, Lord Dennis Arthur, Greenhill, Sir Dennis Grey, Sir Edward, Gillenhammer, Pierres, Haken, King of Norway, Hague, Sir Douglas, Hailsham, Lord, Haldane, Richard Burdone, Halifax, Lord, Hall, Sir Peter Vickers, Hambro, Sir Jocelyn, Hamilton, Cyril, Harriman, Averill, Hart, Sir Robert, Hartman, Arthur H. Healy, Dennis, Helsby, Lord, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Her Majesty Queen Juliana, Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrix, Her Royal Highness Queen Margrethe, Heseltine, Sir William, Hesse, Grand Duke Descendants, Family Designate, Hoffman, Paul G. Holland, William, House of Braganza, House of Hohenzollern, House Colonel Mandel, Howe Sir Geoffrey, Hughes, Thomas H. Hugo, Theman, Hutchins, Robert M. Huxley, Aldous, Inchcape Lord, Jameson, Ken, Jaffet, Ernst Israel, J. John, Family Designate, Keynes, John Maynard, Jodrey, J. Joseph, Sir Keith, Katz, Milton, Kaufman, Asher, Keith, Sir Kenneth, Keswick, Sir William Johnston or Keswick, HNL Keswick, William Johnston, Kimberly Lord, King, Dr. Alexander, Kirk, Grayson L. Kissinger, Henry, Kitchener, Lord Horatio, Constam, Max, Korsch, Carl, Lambert, Baron Pierre, Lawrence G. Lazar, Lehrman Lewis, Lever, Sir Harold, Lewin, Dr. Kurt, Lipman, Walter, Livingston, Robert R. Family Designate, Lockhart, Bruce, Lockhart, Gordon, Linowitz, S. Loudon, Sir John, Luzzatto, P. Paolo, Mackay, Lord of Clasfern, Mackay Tallock, Sir Hugh, Mackinder, Halford, Macmillan, Harold, Matheson, Jardine, Mazzini, Giuseppe, McLaughlin, Wee McCloy, John J. McFadyen, Sir Andrew, McGee, George, Macmillan, Harold, Mellon, Andrew, Mellon, William Larimer or Family Designate, Meyer, Frank, Missionaire, Roland, Mikovan, Anastas, Milner, Lord Alfred, Mitterrand, Francois, Monette, Jean, Montague, Samuel, Montefiore, Lord Sabag or Bishop Hugh, Morgan, John P. Mott, Stewart, Mountain, Sir Brian Edward, Mountain, Sir Dennis, Mountbatten, Lord Lewis, Month A or Family Designate, Naisbitt, John, Neiman, Yuval, Newbigging, David, Nichols, Lord Nicholas of Bethel, Norman, Montague, O'Brien of Lotherby, Lord, Ogilvy, Angus, Okita, Saburo, Oldfield, Sir Morris, Oppenheimer, Sir Ernest and successor Harry, Ormsby Gore, David, Lord Harlech, Orsini, Franco Bonicassi, Ortolani, Umberto, Ostagai, J.P.W. Paley, William S. Pallavicini, Palme, Olaf, Palmerston, Palmstierna, Jacob, Pau, Y.K. Pease, Richard T. Pecci, Aurelio, Peake, Sir Edmund, Pellegrino, Michael, Cardinal, Perkins, Nelson, Pestle, Edward, Peterson, Rudolph, Pedersen, Peter G. Petty, John R. Philip, Prince, Duke of Edinburgh, Piercy, George, Pinchot, Gifford, Pratt, Charles, Price Waterhouse Designate, Radzawal, Rainier, Prince, Raskob, John Jacob, Recanati, Rees, John Rawlings, Rees, John, Rennie, Sir John, Redinger, Joseph, Rhodes, Cecil John, Rockefeller, David, Roll, Lord Eric of Ipston, Rosenthal, Morton, Rostow, Eugene, Rothmere, Lord, Rothschild, Ely D. or Edmund D. and or Baron Rothschild, Runcie, Dr. Robert, Russell, Lord John, Russell, Sir Bertrand, St. Gowers, Jean Salisbury, Marquis de Robert Gascoigne, Cecil, Shelburne, the Salisbury Lord, Samuel, Sir Marcus, Sandberg, M.G. Sarnoff, Robert, Schmidheine, Stefan or alternate brothers Thomas, Alexander, Schoenberg, Andrew, Schroeder, Schultz, George, Schwarzenberg, E. Shawcross, Sir Hartley, Sheridan, Walter, Shiloch, Reuben, Salito, Sir Percy, Simon, William, Sloan, Alfred P. Smuts, Jan, Spellman, Sproul, Robert, Stalls, Dr. C. Stamp, Lord Family Designate, Steele, David, Steiger, George, Strathmore, Lord, Strong, Sir Kenneth, Strong, Maurice, Sutherland, Swathling, Lord, Swire, J.K. Tass, G. or Family Designate, Temple, Sir R. Thompson, William Boyce, Thompson, Lord, Thiessen, Bornemisa, Baron Hans Henrik, Trevelyan, Lord Humphrey, Turner, Sir Mark, Turner, Ted, Tyron, Lord, Urquhart, Victor, Vanden Broek, H. Vanderbilt, Vance, Cyrus, Verity, William C. Vesti, Lord Amuel, Vickers, Sir Geoffrey, Villiers, Gerald Hyde, Family Alternate, Volpe, Count, von Fink, Baron August, von Habsburg, Archduke Otto, House of Habsburg, Lorraine, von Thurn and Taxis, Max, Wallenberg, Peter or Family Designate, Wang, Quan Cheng, Dr. Warburg, S.C. Ward Jackson, Lady Barbara, Warner, Raleigh, Warnke, Paul, Warren, Earl, Watson, Thomas, Webb, Sidney, Wild, David, Weil, Dr. Andrew, Weinberger, Sir Caspar, Wiseman, Chame, Wells, H.G. Wheatman, Pearson, Lord Cowdray, White, Sir Dick Goldsmith, Whitney Straight, Wiseman, Sir William, Whittlesbach, Wolfson, Sir Isaac, Wood, Charles, Young, Owen. Bibliography, Summaries and Notes, 1980. S. Project, Vance, Cyrus and Yankelevich, Daniel. 1984, Orwell, George. After 20 years, The Decline of NATO and the Search for a New Policy in Europe. Raskin, Marcus and Barnett, Richard. AIR War and Stress, Janus Irving. An American Company, The Tragedy of United Fruit, Scammell, Henry and McCann, Thomas. An Introduction to the Principles and Morals of Legislation. Bentham, Jeremy. In this 1780 work, Bentham claimed that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. They govern us in all we do. Bentham went on to justify the horrors of the Jacobin terrorists in the French Revolution. Annual Report of Bank Loimy, 1977. At that point in time, the inside story of the Senate Watergate Committee, Thompson, Fred. I was told where to find Thompson, who was the minority counsel on the Irvin Committee, by Bernard Barker, one of the Watergate burglars. My meeting with Barker took place outside an A&P supermarket quite close to the Coral Gables Country Club in Coral Gables, Florida. Barker said Thompson was with his law partner who was on a short visit to his mother in Coral Gables, which was only about 5 minutes away from the A&P supermarket. I went there and met Thompson, who expressed his disappointment over the way Irvin had imposed such severe restrictions on evidence he, Thompson, could admit. Baku, An Eventful History, Henry, J.D. Beasts of the Apocalypse, O'Grady, Olivia Maria. This remarkable book gives details about a large number of historical figures, including William C. Bullitt, who conspired with Lloyd George to pull the rug out from under White Russian generals Denikin and Wrangel at a time when they had the Bolshevik Red Army on the very brink of defeat. It also gives a great deal of information about the utterly corrupt petroleum industry. Of particular interest is the information it provides on Sir Moses Montefiore, of the ancient Venetian black nobility Montefiores. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. British Opium Policy in China, Owen David Edward. British Opium Policy, F.S. Turner. Cecil Rhodes, Flint John. Cecil Rhodes, The Anatomy of an Empire, Marlowe John. Conference on Transatlantic Imbalance and Collaboration, Rappaport, Dr. Anatol. Conversations with Dzerzhinsky, Riley, Sidney. In British intelligence documents not published. Creating a Particular Behavioral Structure, Cartwright Darwin. Crystallizing Public Opinion, Bernays, Edward. Democratic Ideals and Reality, Mackinder, Halford. Irvin, Senator Sam. Apart from obstructing the introduction of vital evidence in the Watergate hearings, Irvin, in my opinion, while holding himself out as a constitutional authority, consistently betrayed this nation by opposing aid to church schools, citing the judicial opinions in the Everson case. Irvin, a Scottish Rite Freemason, which in my opinion is why he was given the Watergate Committee chair, was eventually honored receiving the prestigious Scottish Rite Individual Rights Support Award. In 1973, Irvin held a luncheon in the Senate dining room in honor of Sovereign Grand Commander Clausen. Everson v. Board of Education, 33 OUSY 1947. Frankfurter Papers, Box 99 and Box 125, Hugo Black Correspondence. Gnosticism, Mamshianism, Catharism, The New Columbia Encyclopedia. Goals of Manel, Laszlo, Ernin, God's Banker, Cornwell Rupert. This book gave some insight into P2 and the murder of Roberto Calvi, P2 Masonry, Human Quality, Peche, A. International Journal of Electronics, Introduction to the Sociology of Music, Adorno, Theo. Adorno was kicked out of Germany by Hitler because of his cult of Dionysus music experiments. He was moved to England by the Oppenheimers, where the British royal family gave him facilities at Gordonstoun School and their support. It was here that Adorno perfected Beatle music rock, punk rock, heavy metal rock, and all of the decadent clamor that passes for music today. It is worthy of note that the name The Beatles was chosen to show a connection between modern rock, the Isis cult, and the scarab beetle, a religious symbol of ancient Egypt. Invasion from Mars, Cantrell. In this work, Cantrell analyzes the behavior patterns of people who fled in panic following the Orson Welles experiment in mass hysteria, using H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Investigation of the Kennedy assassination, the uncommissioned report on Jim Garrison findings. Paris, Flamand. IPS Revisited, Coleman, Dr. John. ISIS Unveiled, A Master Key to the Ancient and Modern Science and Theology, Blavatsky, Madame Helena. John Jacob Astor, Businessman, Porter, Kenneth Wiggins. Justice Black's Papers, Box 25, General Correspondence, Davies. Kingmakers, Kingbreakers, The Story of the Cecil Family, Coleman, Dr. John. Liberation Theology. Information was drawn from work by Juan Luis Segundo, who in turn drew heavily upon the writings of Karl Marx. Segundo savagely attacked the Catholic Church instruction against liberation theology, as found in Instruction on Certain Aspects of the Theology of Liberation, published August 6, 1984. Lies Clearer Than Truth, Barnett Richard, founder-member of IPS. McCall's Magazine, January 1983. McGraw-Hill Group, Associated Press. Portions of reports from 28 magazines owned by McGraw-Hill and AP Stories. Memoirs of a British Agent, Lockhart Bruce. In this book, we are told how the Bolshevik Revolution was controlled out of London. Lockhart was Lord Milner's representative who went to Russia to watch over Milner's investment in Lenin and Trotsky. Lockhart had access to Lenin and Trotsky at short notice, even though Lenin frequently had a waiting room full of high-ranking officials and foreign delegates, some having been waiting to see him for as long as 5 days. Yet Lockhart never had to wait more than a few hours to see either man. Lockhart carried a letter signed by Trotsky informing all Bolshevik officials that Lockhart had special status and should be given the utmost cooperation at all times. Mind Games, Murphy, Michael. Miscellaneous Old Records. India House Documents, London. MK Ultra LSD Experiment, CIA Files 1953 to 1957. Mr. William Cecil and Queen Elizabeth, Reed, Conyers. Murder, Anslinger, Henry. Anslinger was at one time the #1 agent in the Drug Enforcement Agency, and his book is highly critical of the so-called war on drugs allegedly being waged by the U.S. government. My Father, A Remembrance, Black, Hugo L., Junior National Council of Churches, Josephson, Emmanuel, in his book, Rockefeller, Internationalist. Oil Imperialism, The International Struggle for Petroleum, Fisher, Lewis. Papers of Sir George Birdwood, India House Documents, London. Patterns in ISDIA title. I-Reading Achievement Tests, Stanford Research Institute. Population Bomb, Ehrlich, Paul. Professor Frederick Wells Williamson, India House Documents, London. Public Agenda Foundation, founded in 1975 by Cyrus Vance and Daniel Yankelevich. Public Opinion, Lippmann, Walter. Revolution Through Technology, Coudenhove Kalergi, Count Rockefeller, Internationalist. Josephson details how the Rockefellers used their wealth to penetrate the Christian church in America and how they later used their #1 agent, John Foster Dulles, who was related to them, to maintain their grip on every aspect of church life in this country. Room 3603, Hyde, Montgomery. The book gives some detail about M16 British intelligence operations run by Sir William Stevenson out of the RCA building in New York. But, as is usual with cover stories, the real events have been omitted. Special Relationships, America in Peace and War, Wheeler Bennett, Sir John. Steps to the Ecology of the Mind, Bateson, Gregory. Bateson was one of the Tavistock New Science scientists in the top 5 at Tavistock, and later did much to formulate and manage the 46-year war on America, conducted by Tavistock. Sterling Drug. William C. Bullitt was once on its board of directors, and was also on the board of IG Farben. Technotronic Era, Brzezinski Z. Terrorism in the United States, including attacks on U.S. intelligence agencies. FBI Files #100, 447935, #104-47735, and #104-46784. The Cairo Documents. Haikal, Muhammad. Haikal was the grand old man of Egyptian journalism, and he was present at the interview given to Zhou Enlai by Nasser, in which the Chinese leader vowed to get even with Britain and the U.S. over their opium trade in China. The Chasm Ahead, Pesce, A. The Dlaries of Sir Bruce Lockhart Bruce, The Engineering of Consent, Bernays. In this 1955 book, Bernays lays out the modus operandi of how to persuade targeted groups to change their minds on important issues that can and do alter the national direction of a country. The book also deals with the unleashing of psychiatric shock troops, such as we see in lesbian and homosexual organizations, environmental groups, abortion rights groups, and the like. Psychiatric shock troops was a concept developed by John Rawlings Rees, the founder of the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. The Federal Budget and Social Reconstruction, IPS fellows Raskin and Barnett. A list of members of Congress who asked IPS to produce the alternative budget study and/or supported it is too long to include here, but contained such prominent names as Tom Harkness, Henry Ruiz, Patricia Schroeder, Les Aspin, Ted Weiss, Don Edwards, Barbara Mikulski, Mary Rose Okar, Ronald Dellums, and Peter Rodino. The Huxleys Clark, the Imperial Drug Trade Roundtree, the Jesuits Martin Malachi, the later Cecils Rose Kenneth, the legacy of Malthus Chase Allen, the management of sustainable growth Cleveland Harlan. Cleveland was commissioned by NATO to report on just how far the Club of Rome's post-industrial society zero-growth blueprint to wreck the industrial base of the United States had succeeded. This shocking document should be read by every patriotic American who feels an urgent need for an explanation as to why the U.S. is in a deep economic depression at the end of 1991. The Men Who Ruled India, Woodruff, Philip. The Open Conspiracy, Wells, H.G. In this work, Wells describes how in the New World Order, which he calls the New Republic, useless eaters, excess population, will be gotten rid of. The men of the New Republic will not be squeamish either in facing or inflicting death. They will have an ideal that will make killing worthwhile. Like Abraham, they will have the faith to kill, and they will have no superstitions about death. They will hold, I anticipate, that a certain portion of the population exists only on sufferance out of pity and patience, and on the understanding that they do not propagate, and I do not foresee any reason to oppose that they will not hesitate to kill when that sufferance is abused. All such killings will be done with an opiate. If deterrent punishments are used at all in the code of the future, the deterrent shall be neither death nor mutilation of the body, but good scientifically caused pain. The United States has a very large contingent of Wells converts who would not hesitate to follow the dictates of Wells once the New World Order becomes a reality. Walter Lippmann was one of Wells' most ardent disciples. The Politics of Experience, Lang R.D. Lang was the staff psychologist at Tavistock and, under Andrew Schofield, a member of the governing council. The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, McCoy, Alfred W., Reed, C.B. and Adams, Leonard P. The Problem of China, Russell Bertrand. The Pugwash Conferees, Bertrand Russell. In the early 1950s, Russell led a movement urging a nuclear attack on Russia. When it was discovered, Stalin warned that he would not hesitate to retaliate in kind. This led to a quick rethink on the part of Russell, who almost overnight became a pacifist. Thus was born the Ban the Bomb campaign for nuclear disarmament, CND, out of which arose the Pugwash anti-nuclear scientists. In 1957, the first group met at the home of Cyrus Eaton in Nova Scotia, a longtime American communist. The Pugwash Conferees dedicated themselves to anti-nuclear and environmental issues and were a thorn in the side of U.S. efforts to develop nuclear weapons. The Round Table Movement and Imperial Union, Kendall, John. The structure of the popular music industry, the filtering process whereby records are selected for public consumption, Institute for Social Research. This work explains how hit parades, the top 10, now expanded to the top 40, and other charades are constructed to deceive listeners and convince them what they hear is what they like. The works of Jeremy Bentham, Bowering, John. Bentham was the liberal of his day and the agent for Lord Shelburne, British Prime Minister at the end of the American War of Independence. Bentham believed that man was no more than a common animal, and Bentham's theories were later written up by his protege, David Hume. Writing about instinct in animals, Hume said, which we are so apt to admire as extraordinary and inexplicable. But our wonder will perhaps cease or diminish when we consider that the experimental reasoning itself which we possess in common with beasts, and upon which the whole conduct of life depends, is nothing but a species of instinct or mechanical power that acts in us unknown to ourselves. though the instincts be different, yet still it is an instinct. Time, Perspective, and Morale, Levin B. Toward a Humanistic Psychology, Cantrell. Trend Report, Nisbet, John. U.S. Congress, House Committee on Internal Security, reporting on the Institute for Policy Studies, IPS, and the Pentagon Papers. In the spring of 1970, FBI operative William McDermott went to see Richard Best, who at that time was RAND's top security officer, to warn him of the possibility that Ellsberg had removed Vietnam study papers done by RAND and had copied them outside of RAND premises. Best took McDermott to see Dr. Harry Rowan, who headed RAND and who was also one of Ellsberg's closest friends. Rowan told the FBI that a Defense Department inquiry was going on, and on his assurance, the FBI apparently dropped its investigation of Ellsberg. In fact, no inquiry was in progress, nor did the DoD ever conduct one. Ellsberg retained his security clearance at RAND and blatantly went on removing and copying Vietnam War documents right up to the time of his exposure during the Pentagon Papers affair, which rocked the Nixon administration to its foundations. Understanding Man's Social Behavior, Cantrell. Cantrell was primarily responsible for establishing the Association for Humanistic Psychology, based in San Francisco, that taught TAVISTOCK methods. It is in institutions of this type that we find the lines between pure science and social engineering become totally obliterated. The term social engineering covers every aspect of methods used by Tavistock to bring about massive charges in group orientation towards social, economic, religious, and political events, and brainwashing of target groups who then believe that opinions expressed and viewpoints taken are their own. Selected individuals underwent the same Tavistockian treatment, resulting in major shifts in personality and behavior. The effect of this on the national scene was, and still is, devastating, and is one of the principal factors in bringing the United States into the twilight, decline, and fall state of being in which the country finds itself at the close of 1991. I did a report on this national condition under the title Twilight, Decline, and Fall of the United States of America, which was published in L. 987. The Association for Human Psychology was founded by Abraham Maslow in L. 957 as a Club of Rome project. Another Tavistock Club of Rome commissioned opinion-making research center was established by Rhesus Likert and Ronald Lippert, who called it the Center for Research in the Utilization of Scientific Knowledge. The facility was under the directorship of Club of Rome's Donald Michael. The center drew heavily on the Office of Public Opinion Research established at Princeton University in L. 940. It was from here that Cantrell taught many of the techniques used by today's pollsters' opinion makers. Unpublished Letters, Kipling, Rudyard. Kipling was a Wells disciple and, like Wells, believed in fascism as a means of world control. Kipling adopted the running cross as his personal emblem. The running cross was later adopted by Hitler and with slight modifications became known as the swastika. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to Sauna Patriots channel.